Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the starship Iron Will. His weathered face showed the scars of 20 years fighting in space. The metal deck under his boots hummed with the power of engines that could push the massive warship faster than light itself. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet focus. The Iron Will was not a beautiful ship. It looked like what it was, a weapon built by humans who had learned to fight on a world that tried to kill them every day. Thick armor plates covered its hull. Gun turrets stuck out like the spines of some deadly creature. Other alien races built their ships to look elegant and peaceful. Humans built theirs to win wars. Tae-ho watched the stars through the main screen. Out here on the edge of human space, everything was quiet. Too quiet. His fingers drummed against the command chair as he waited for something to happen. In his experience, quiet never lasted long. Communications Officer Park Min-ho sat at his station, listening to the endless chatter of space, radio waves from distant stars, the hum of cosmic radiation, the whispers of ships far away. Most of it was just noise, but Min-ho had good ears, and he knew the difference between random signals and something important. A soft beep made him look up from his console. The sound came again, faint but steady. Min-ho frowned and adjusted his equipment. The signal was weak, almost lost in the background noise of space, but there was a pattern to it. Numbers repeated in a sequence that made his heart beat faster. "Captain," Min-ho called out. "I'm picking up something strange." Tae-ho turned his chair toward the communications station. "What kind of strange?" "It's faint, sir, coming from the Vega sector. But the pattern—" Min-ho played the signal through the bridge speakers. A series of beeps and tones filled the air. "It sounds like a distress call." Lieutenant Choi So-young looked up from her xenolinguistics station. She was young but smart, with a gift for understanding alien languages that had saved human lives more than once. Her fingers moved quickly over her computer as she analyzed. "The signal. Run it through the translation matrix," Tae-ho ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." So-young's computer worked for several minutes, comparing the signal to thousands of known alien communication patterns, the screen filled with data, equations, and probability charts. Finally, words appeared. "Sir," So-young said, her voice tight, with excitement. "This is definitely a distress signal. The mathematical patterns match the Kalari communication protocol." Tae-ho's expression grew serious. The Kalari were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful creatures. They lived on ocean worlds and spent their time healing others. They had no weapons, no armies, no way to defend themselves. If they were sending out distress calls, something very bad was happening. "Can you get more details?" Tae-ho asked. So-young worked at her station, trying to clean up the signal and extract more information. The computer translated fragments of the message, putting words together like pieces of a puzzle. "Their home world is under attack," So-young reported. "They're asking for help from anyone who can hear them. The attackers are—" She paused, checking her translation. "The Vraxi hegemony." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew about the Vraxi. They were a military empire that conquered other worlds by force. They believed that might made right, and they had no mercy for those weaker than themselves. Humans had a peace treaty with the Vraxi, but it was the kind of peace that existed only because both sides had enough weapons to destroy each other. "The Kalari have no defenses," So-young continued. "They're completely helpless. The message says the Vraxi are capturing civilians and taking them away for some kind of processing." Tae-ho's jaw tightened. He had fought the Vraxi before, during the border wars. He knew what they were capable of. The idea of them attacking defenseless civilians made anger burn in his chest. "Send this information to Earth immediately," he ordered. "Admiral Lee Dong-wook needs to see this." Minho's fingers flew over his controls, sending the encoded message toward Earth at faster-than-light speed. It would take time to reach the home system, but the Admiral would get it within hours. While they waited, So-young continued working on the Kalari signal. More fragments came through, painting a picture of horror. The Vraxi had arrived without warning, their massive warships surrounding the peaceful ocean world. They had demanded surrender, and when the Kalari refused to join, their empire, the bombardment began. "They're targeting the healing centers," So-young said, her voice shaking. "The Vraxi know the Kalari can regenerate tissue and heal injuries. They want to capture them and use their abilities." Tae-ho stood up from his command chair and walked to the main screen. The stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere out there, innocent people were dying while he sat safely on his ship. It made him feel sick. The reply from Admiral Dong-wook came faster than expected. The message was short and simple. "Prepare for fleet mobilization. Authorization code follows." Tae-ho read the authorization code and felt his blood turn cold. It was a war code, the kind used only when humanity itself was threatened. But this time they weren't defending human space. They were going to war to protect strangers. "All hands, this is the captain," Tae-ho announced over the ship's communication system. "We have received orders to mobilize for combat operations. Our mission is to respond to a distress call from the Kalari homeworld in the Vega sector. The enemy is the Vraxi hegemony. This is not a drill." Around the bridge, his officers straightened in their chairs. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humans could do when innocent lives were at stake. The iron will began to turn, its massive engines building power for the jump to hyperspace. Soon, they would be joined by other human ships, forming a fleet. That would remind the universe why Earth was called a death world. But for now, all they could do was listen to the faint distress signal and prepare for war. 6 hours after the distress signal reached Earth, space around the Sol system came alive with activity. Ships that had been scattered across human territory began moving toward a single gathering point. This was not the slow, careful mobilization that other alien races preferred. This was humanity moving with the speed and purpose of predators sensing blood. Admiral Lee Dong-wook stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching dozens of screens that showed ships jumping into formation. Each vessel represented thousands of tons of metal and weapons, crewed by humans who had grown up on a world that tried to kill them every day. Now those same humans were about to unleash that deadly efficiency on enemies who thought mercy was weakness. Dong-wook was older than most fleet commanders, his gray hair and lined face showing the weight of countless decisions. He had been fighting alien enemies since before many of his captains were born. But this mission felt different. This time, they were not defending human space or human lives. They were going to war for strangers who could not defend themselves. The first ship to report ready was the Silent Reaper, a stealth destroyer commanded by Captain Yoon Jae-sung. The Reaper was built for hunting, its black hull designed to absorb sensor beams and disappear into the darkness of space. Jae-sung himself was like his ship, quiet, deadly, and absolutely ruthless when the situation required it. Silent Reaper. "Ready for jump," Jae-sung reported over the communication link. "Stealth systems at full power. We can be in the Vega sector in 12 hours. Negative, Dong-wook replied. You wait for the main fleet. This is not a scouting mission anymore. This is an extermination. The next ship to join the formation was the Fury of Terra, a massive carrier commanded by Shin Hyojin. The Fury carried 3 squadrons of atmospheric fighters, small, fast ships designed to operate in the crushing gravity wells of planets. Other alien races thought it was impossible to build fighters that could work both in space and in atmosphere. Humans had done it anyway, because humans specialized in doing impossible things. Hyojin was young for a carrier commander, but she had earned her position by being the best pilot in the human fleet. She understood that fighters were not just weapons. They were symbols. When enemy forces saw human fighters diving through their formations at impossible speeds, they remembered that humans came from a death world. Fury of Terra reporting, Hyojin said. All fighter squadrons ready for deployment. Pilots are eager to show the Vraxi what Earth-trained reflexes can do. More ships continued to arrive. The battleship Unbreakable, commanded by Captain Bae Young-soo, took position at the center of the formation. The Unbreakable lived up to its name. It was built like a fortress that could fly, with armor thick enough to survive direct hits from weapons that could crack moons. Young-soo himself was known for his stubborn refusal to retreat, no matter how bad the odds became. The assault carrier, Stormbringer, joined the fleet under the command of Colonel Nam In-soo. Unlike the Fury of Terra, which carried fighters, the Stormbringer was loaded with Marines, human soldiers trained to fight in zero-gravity, toxic atmospheres, and crushing gravity that would kill most alien species. In-soo was the kind of officer who led from the front, and his Marines would follow him into the fires of hell if he asked them to. As the fleet grew larger, other ships arrived from across human space. Destroyers, cruisers, supply ships, and medical vessels all took their positions in the formation. Each ship carried humans who had been shaped by life on a world where everything was dangerous. They were about to face an enemy that had never encountered anything like them. Dr. Han Mi-young worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the medical ship Mercy's Hand. As the fleet's chief xenobiologist, it was her job to understand alien species and how to help them. The Kalari were unlike any species humans had encountered before. They were completely peaceful, with no concept of violence or warfare. Their entire evolutionary history had been about cooperation and healing. They're going to be traumatized just by seeing us fight, Mi-young told her medical team. The Kalari have never witnessed violence on the scale we're about to unleash. We need to be ready to treat them for psychological shock as well as physical injuries. Engineer Kwon Sung-min was having his own challenges aboard the technical support. Ship Iron Forge. The Vraxi used different technology than humans, and he needed to modify human weapons to be effective against Vraxi defenses. Sung-min was the kind of engineer who could build a starship engine from scrap metal, but even he was struggling with the time pressure. Their energy shields are designed to stop laser weapons, Sung-min reported to Admiral Dong-wook. But our kinetic weapons should punch right through them. The problem is their armor. It's some kind of crystalline matrix that absorbs impact energy. Find a way to break it, Dong-wook ordered. I don't care if you have to invent new physics. Those Vraxi ships need to die when we shoot them. Intelligence Officer Lim Ji-woo was analyzing every piece of data they had about Vraxi military tactics. The information was not encouraging. The Vraxi fleet attacking the Kalari homeworld consisted of over 200 warships, including some of their largest dreadnoughts. Against this force, the humans were bringing 47 ships. The numbers are not in our favor, Jiwoo reported. But the Vraxi have never fought humans before. They're used to enemies who fight by the rules of civilized warfare. They don't know what we're capable of. That was exactly what Admiral Dong-wook was counting on. The Vraxi thought they understood military power because they had conquered dozens of peaceful species, but they had never faced an enemy that came from a death world. They had never fought humans who had been shaped by a planet where only the strongest and smartest survived. Captain Kim Tae-ho received his final orders as the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. The Iron Will would lead the assault, charging directly into the heart of the Vraxi formation. It was a dangerous mission, but Tae-ho had never backed down from danger in his life. Remember, Dong-wook told his captains over the command link, we are not just representing humanity today. We are showing the galaxy what happens when someone attacks the defenseless. The Vraxi wanted to prey on the weak. They're about to learn why predators avoid Deathworlders. The final ship to join the formation was the hospital ship Gentle Rain, commanded by Dr. Park Kyung-ho. Unlike the warships around it, the Gentle Rain was designed to save lives rather than take them. But today, it would serve as a reminder of what humans fought for, the right of innocent beings to live in peace. As the fleet prepared for the jump to hyperspace, each captain made final checks of their weapons and systems. The human ships looked like nothing else in the galaxy. Where other species built elegant vessels that moved like dancers through space, human ships looked like the weapons they were, brutal, efficient, and absolutely deadly. The jump to hyperspace began with a flash of light that could be seen from Earth. 47 human warships disappeared from normal space, carrying with them the fury of a species that had climbed to the top of the food chain on a world that never showed mercy. In 12 hours, the Vraxi would learn what it meant to face the children of a death world. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Aquinas system, like a pack of wolves scenting blood. What they found there made even hardened veterans feel sick to their stomachs. The beautiful blue-green world of the Kalari was surrounded by the broken remains of what had once been a peaceful civilization. Captain Kim Tae-ho stared at the main screen of the Iron Will in horror. Floating in space around the planet were the shattered hulks of Kalari bioships. These vessels had been grown rather than built, living creatures bred over centuries to carry the peaceful aliens through space. Now they drifted dead and bleeding, their organic hulls torn open by Vraxi weapons. "My God," whispered Communications Officer Park Min-ho. "They're still alive! Some of the bioships are still alive!" The sensors showed that several of the creatures were indeed still breathing, their massive hearts beating weakly as they died slowly in the vacuum of space. The Vraxi had not bothered to put them out of their misery. They had simply crippled them and left them to suffer. Lieutenant Choi So-young was picking up radio transmissions from the planet's surface. Her face went pale as she translated the messages. "Captain, the Vraxi are herding civilians into camps. They're separating the young from the old, and they're taking the healthy ones to what they call processing centers." Tae-ho's hands clenched into fists. He had fought in many wars, but he had never seen anything this cruel. The Vraxi were not just conquering the Kalari, they were treating them like cattle to be slaughtered. Admiral Lee Dong-wook's voice came over the fleet communication channel. His words were calm, but there was ice-cold fury underneath them. "All ships, this is Admiral Dong-wook. What we are seeing here is not warfare. This is genocide. The Vraxi have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. From this moment forward, we show them no mercy." Major Park Kyung-ho was aboard the reconnaissance ship Shadow Dancer, using advanced sensors to scan the planet below. What he found made his blood boil. The Vraxi had built massive facilities on the Kalari continents, structures designed to keep large numbers of prisoners alive while harvesting their organs and regenerative tissues. "Admiral," Kyung-ho reported, "the Vraxi are running organ farms. Down there. They're keeping the Kalari alive just long enough to cut pieces off them and grow them back. Sir, they're torturing millions of innocent civilians." The transmission was heard by every ship in the human fleet. Soldiers who had seen the worst horrors of war felt their hearts fill with rage. These were not military targets or enemy combatants. These were peaceful beings whose only crime was refusing to join the Vraxi Empire. The Vraxi fleet was impressive by galactic standards. Over 200 warships orbited the planet, their crystal hulls gleaming in the light of the system's star. The largest ships were massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying entire cities with a single volley. The Vraxi had used overwhelming force to crush any resistance before it could begin. Overlord Krethak commanded the Vraxi fleet from his flagship, a massive vessel called the Bone Crusher. He was a veteran of dozens of conquests, and he had never met a species that could stand against the might of the Vraxi military. When his sensors detected the approaching human ships, he felt only mild annoyance. 47 ships, Krethak said to his officers. "These humans are either very brave or very stupid. Send them the standard warning message." The message reached the Iron Will within minutes. Krethak's voice was filled with arrogant confidence as he spoke in broken human language. "Human fleet, you are entering Vraxi territory. The creatures on this world are now property of the hegemony. Leave immediately or be destroyed." Captain Taeho listened to the message and felt something cold settle in his chest. He had been hoping for some sign that the Vraxi could be reasoned with, some hint that they might show mercy to their prisoners. Instead, they were treating the Kalari like property to be owned and used. "Open a channel to the Vraxi flagship," Taeho ordered. The communication link crackled to life, and Taeho found himself looking at Overlord Krethak on his main screen. The Vraxi commander was a large, insectoid creature with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked when he spoke. His uniform was covered with decorations marking his victories over peaceful species. "I am Captain Kim Taeho of the Terran Defense Fleet," Taeho said in a voice like Arctic wind. "You have exactly 1 minute to begin evacuating all Kalari civilians from your facilities. After that, we will consider you a clear and present danger to innocent life." Krethak's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "You threaten me, human? I have conquered 17 worlds. I have crushed species far stronger than yours. You will leave, or you will die with the fish creatures." Taeho looked at the alien commander for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was completely calm. "Thank you for clarifying your position. Iron Will out." The communication link closed, and Taeho turned to his weapons officer. "Target their flagship, main battery full charge." "Sir," the weapons officer said, "we'll be starting a war." "No," Taeho replied, "we'll be ending one." The Iron Will's main battery was a magnetic accelerator cannon that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. When it discharged, the blast lit up space like a miniature star. The projectile crossed the distance to the Vraxi flagship in less than a second, moving too fast for their sensors to track. The Bone Crusher's energy shields flared and died as the kinetic projectile punched through them like they were made of paper. The ship's crystalline armor, designed to absorb energy weapons, shattered under the impact of pure kinetic force. the massive dreadnought broke apart in a silent explosion that sent debris flying in all directions. For a moment, the entire Vraxi fleet sat frozen in shock. They had never seen a weapon that could destroy their most powerful ship with a single shot. Then the reality of the situation hit them, and every Vraxi vessel began moving toward the human fleet. "All ships," Admiral Dongwook ordered. "You are free to engage. Show them what children of a death world can do." What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of what happened when an apex predator species decided that mercy was no longer an option. The human ships moved through space like hunting animals, their weapons designed not for elegant warfare, but for absolute destruction. Commander Shin Hee-jin launched her fighter squadrons from the Fury of Terra in a maneuver that other species would have considered suicide. The small human fighters dove directly into the Vraxi formation at speeds that would have liquefied most alien pilots. But humans had evolved under crushing gravity and had trained their entire lives for this kind of combat. Captain Yoon Jae-sung brought the Silent Reaper out of stealth mode directly behind a group of Vraxi cruisers. His ship's weapons were designed for close-range assassination, and he used them to devastating effect. 3 Vraxi ships died before they even knew he was there. The Vraxi discovered that their tactics, developed for fighting civilized species, were useless against humans. Where other races tried to minimize casualties and preserve their ships, humans threw themselves into battle with the ferocity of creatures who had learned to fight or die on a world that showed no mercy. Captain Bae Young-soo took the unbreakable directly into the center of the Vraxi formation, using his ship's massive armor to absorb their fire while his weapons tore them apart from within. The maneuver was insane by any reasonable military standard, but it worked because humans were not reasonable when innocent lives were at stake. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Vraxi fleet had been completely destroyed. Not a single ship escaped to carry word of their defeat back to the hegemony. The humans had fought with such overwhelming force that the enemy had simply ceased to exist. But the real work was just beginning. Down on the planet's surface, millions of Kalari civilians were waiting to be rescued from the hell that the Vraxi had created for them. With the Vraxi fleet destroyed, the human ships turned their attention to the planet below. But this would not be a simple rescue mission. The Vraxi had built massive fortress complexes on the surface, each one filled with thousands of Kalari prisoners. These facilities were heavily defended, and the enemy soldiers inside had nothing left to lose. Colonel Nam In-soo stood in the deployment bay of the Stormbringer, looking at his Marines as they prepared for planetfall. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were humans who had trained their entire lives to fight in conditions that would kill most alien species. Their powered armor could survive in toxic atmospheres, crushing gravity, and even brief exposure to stellar radiation. "Listen up," In-soo told his troops. "The enemy down there has been torturing innocent civilians for weeks. They've been treating peaceful beings like cattle in a slaughterhouse. Today, we show them what happens when you cross that line." Marines checked their weapons one last time. These were not the elegant energy weapons that most galactic militaries preferred. Human weapons were crude, brutal things designed to kill efficiently in any environment. Magnetic accelerator rifles that could punch through starship armor, explosive charges that could level buildings, plasma cutters that could slice through any known material. Sergeant Kim Do-hyun led one of the assault squads. He had grown up in the heavy gravity zones of Earth, where the air was thin and every step was a struggle. Now that training would serve him well. The Kalari homeworld had crushing pressure that would slow down most alien soldiers. But Do-hyun and his team moved through it like they were born there. The drop pods launched from the Stormbringer like meteors falling toward the planet. Each pod was designed to survive atmospheric entry at extreme speeds, punching through enemy defenses with the force of artillery shells. The Vraxi defenders watched in horror as the human soldiers fell from the sky like avenging angels. Do-hyun's pod smashed through the roof of a Vraxi fortress, landing in the middle of their command center. The impact killed 3 enemy soldiers instantly and sent the rest scrambling for cover. Do-hyun kicked open his pod door and stepped out into a world of chaos and violence. The fortress was filled with the sounds of screaming, not the screams of battle, but the cries of Kalari civilians being tortured in the processing centers. Do-hyun had heard intelligence reports about what the Vraxi were doing to their prisoners, but hearing it with his own ears made rage burn in his chest like a living flame. "Squad, on me!" Do-hyun ordered through his helmet radio. "We're going to shut this place down." The Vraxi soldiers in the fortress were used to fighting other civilized species who followed rules of engagement. They expected their enemies to be careful about collateral damage, to try to minimize casualties, to fight with honor and restraint. They were not prepared for humans who fought like their homeworld had taught them, with absolute brutality when innocent lives were at stake. Do-hyun's team moved through the fortress like wolves hunting sheep. They used demolition charges to blast holes straight through walls, rather than bothering with doors. They threw grenades into rooms full of enemy soldiers without checking for civilians first, because their sensors showed that the Vraxi kept their prisoners in separate sections of the building. The Vraxi defenders found themselves facing an enemy that ignored their defensive positions and simply destroyed them. When Do-hyun's squad encountered a barricaded doorway, they did not try to fight their way through it. Instead, they used shaped charges to blow a hole in the wall next to it and attacked from an unexpected direction. Meanwhile, Dr. Han Mi-young was working frantically to save Kalari civilians in the medical bay of the Mercy's Hand. The gentle aquatic beings were traumatized not just by their captivity, but by witnessing the brutal efficiency of human warfare. They whispered among themselves in their musical language, afraid of their rescuers almost as much as their captors. "It's all right," Mi-young told a young Kalari female through a translation device. "The fighting is almost over. You're safe. Now." But the Kalari was staring at video feeds from the planet's surface, watching human marines tear through Vraxi defenses with mechanical precision. "How can such terrible beauty exist?" she asked. "How can destroyers also be saviors?" Mi-young did not have a good answer to that question. She could only focus on treating the injuries that the Vraxi had inflicted on their prisoners. The medical scans showed horrors that made her want to cry. Evidence of systematic torture, organ harvesting, and worse. The Vraxi had not just been cruel, they had been sadistic. Back on the planet's surface, the human assault was reaching its climax. Captain Bae Young-soo had brought the Unbreakable into low orbit and was using its main guns to provide fire support for the Marines. The massive battleship's weapons were designed to fight other starships, but they worked just as well for turning Vraxi fortresses into smoking craters. The turning point came when Lieutenant Choi So-young intercepted a Vraxi communication from one of the remaining strongholds. The enemy commander was ordering his soldiers to execute all Kalari prisoners rather than allow them to be rescued. So-young translated the message in real time and transmitted it to Admiral Dong-wook. The admirals Response was broadcast on all frequencies in every language that the Vraxi understood. You just crossed the line from war to genocide. Prepare to face the consequences. What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. The human fleet stopped taking prisoners entirely. Every Vraxi soldier who had participated in the torture and murder of civilians was hunted down and killed without mercy. There were no surrender negotiations, no prisoner exchanges, no quarter given. Sergeant Do Hyun found himself in the deepest levels of a processing facility, where the Vraxi had been conducting their most horrific experiments. The rooms were filled with medical equipment designed to keep Kalari alive while harvesting their regenerative organs. Do Hyun took one look at the torture chambers and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Burn it all," he ordered his squad. "Every piece of equipment, every computer file, every trace of what happened here. Make sure this can never happen again." The Marines used incendiary charges to destroy the facility completely. The fires burned so hot that the building's foundation melted into glass. When it was over, there was nothing left but a crater where the processing center had been. Engineer Kwon Sung-min was working on the orbital space stations where the Vraxi had been storing Kalari prisoners for transport to other worlds. His job was to modify the alien technology so that human ships could dock with it safely. But what he found in the stations made him sick with rage. The Vraxi had converted cargo holds into prison cells, packing thousands of Kalari into spaces meant for freight. The conditions were so bad that many prisoners had already died from disease and malnutrition. Sung-min worked around the clock to restore life support systems and provide medical care for the survivors. As the last Vraxi stronghold fell, the scope of their crimes became clear. Intelligence Officer Lim Ji-woo compiled reports that painted a picture of systematic genocide. The Vraxi had not just been conquering the Kalari homeworld, they had been conducting a deliberate campaign to exterminate or enslave every member of the species. They were planning to wipe out their entire civilization, Ji-woo reported to Admiral Dong-wook. The survivors would have been kept as breeding stock to produce more regenerative tissue. It was industrial-scale murder. The human response to this revelation was swift and final. Every Vraxi facility on the planet was destroyed. Every computer file containing information about their biological experiments was erased. Every piece of equipment used in their torture chambers was melted down into scrap metal. When the last shot was fired and the last enemy soldier was dead, the humans began the real work of rescue and recovery. But they did it with the same ruthless efficiency that they had shown in battle. Medical teams worked around the clock to save Kalari lives. Engineers restored power and water systems. Marines provided security while civilians were evacuated to safety. The galaxy would remember this day not just as a military victory, but as a demonstration of what humans were capable of when they decided to protect the innocent. The same species that could destroy an entire enemy fleet in 4 hours could also mount the largest humanitarian relief operation in galactic history. And somewhere in the depths of space, word was beginning to spread among the aggressive species of the galaxy. The Deathworlders had shown what they did to those who preyed on the defenseless. The universe had new rules now, and humanity would enforce them with the same deadly precision that had carved civilization from a world that tried to kill them every day. The silence after battle was always the hardest part. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, looking down at the Kalari homeworld through the main screen. The planet's blue-green oceans reflected the light of its star, making it look peaceful and beautiful. But Tae-ho knew that appearances could be deceiving. Down there, millions of innocent beings were trying to rebuild their lives after experiencing horrors that would have broken most species. 3 days had passed since the last Vraxi soldier died. In that time, the human fleet had transformed from a force of destruction into something the galaxy had never seen before, an army of healers. The same ships that had annihilated an entire enemy fleet were now working around the clock to save civilian lives and repair the damage that decades of Vraxi cruelty had caused. Dr. Han-Mi Young had not slept in 72 hours. She moved through the medical bays of the Mercy's Hand like a woman possessed, treating Kalari patients with a combination of human technology and desperate improvisation. The gentle aquatic beings required completely different medical care than humans, but Mi Young was learning as she worked. Their regenerative abilities are incredible, she told her medical team during a brief break. But the Vraxi were exploiting those same abilities to keep them alive during torture. Some of these patients have been subjected to months of systematic abuse. The worst cases were the children, young Kalari who had been separated from their families and used as test subjects for Vraxi experiments. They were physically healthy thanks to their natural healing abilities, but their minds were shattered by trauma. Mi Young found herself wishing that she could heal psychological wounds as easily as she could treat physical injuries. Engineer Kwon Sung-min was facing his own challenges. The Vraxi had damaged much of the Kalari infrastructure when they conquered the planet, and their occupation had made things worse. Power grids designed for peaceful aquatic cities had been overloaded to run Vraxi military equipment. Water purification systems had been contaminated with industrial waste from the processing facilities. It's going to take months to repair all the damage, Sung-min reported to Admiral Lee Dong-wook. But the biggest problem is psychological. The Kalari are afraid to trust anyone right now, even us. They've seen too much cruelty. That fear was understandable. The Kalari had evolved on a world where cooperation and trust were essential for survival. They had never developed the paranoia and suspicion that helped humans survive on their dangerous homeworld. The Vraxi occupation had taught them that there were creatures in the universe who enjoyed causing pain, and that lesson was not easily forgotten. Admiral Dong-wook found himself dealing with a problem that had no military solution. The Kalari elders were grateful for the human rescue, but they were also terrified of their rescuers. They had watched human marines tear through Vraxi defenses with a brutality that shocked them to their cores. How could beings capable of such violence also be protectors? The answer came from an unexpected source. Elder Yulsha was the oldest surviving Kalari on the planet, an ancient being who had lived for over 300 years. She had been one of the few civilians who witnessed the final battle between human and Vraxi forces, and she had seen something that the others had missed. "Your people fight with great anger," Yulsha told Admiral Dong-wook through a translation device. "But it is not anger at us. It is anger for us. You destroy because you must protect. This is not cruelty. This is love expressed through strength." Dong-wook was surprised by the elderly Kalari's insight. Most species that encountered human military forces focused on the violence and missed the motivation behind it. But Yulsha had looked deeper and seen the truth that many humans themselves did not fully understand. "Your species contains such capacity for both creation and destruction," Yulsha continued. "How do you choose which path to follow?" The question haunted Dong-wook for hours. How did humans choose between mercy and violence? What made them protectors instead of predators? Finally, he found an answer that felt true. "We destroy what threatens the innocent," he told Yulsha. "We protect what cannot protect itself. This is what it means to survive a death world. You become strong enough to choose mercy. Those words became the foundation of human diplomatic doctrine. Over the following weeks, they were repeated by human ambassadors throughout the galaxy, as they tried to explain their species' actions at Aquanis. Humanity had shown that they were capable of overwhelming violence, but they had also shown that they would use that violence only against those who deserved it. Captain Yoon Jae-sung was tasked with establishing a permanent human defense station in the Aquanis system. The Silent Reaper and several other ships would remain to ensure that no other aggressive species tried to take advantage of the Kalari's peaceful nature. It was a mission that Jae-sung took personally. He had seen the Vraxi torture chambers, and he would die before allowing anything like that to happen again. Colonel Nam In-soo faced a different challenge. Some of the younger Kalari had approached him about learning basic defensive tactics. They did not want to become warriors, but they wanted to ensure that they would never again be completely helpless in the face of aggression. "We cannot teach you to be soldiers," In-soo explained to a group of young Kalari through a translator. "Your people are not built for violence, and that is not a weakness. It is a strength. But we can teach you to recognize danger and call for help when you need it." The training program that In-soo developed became a model for other peaceful species throughout the galaxy. It focused not on creating fighters, but on building communication networks and early warning systems that would allow helpless civilizations to call for aid before they were overwhelmed. Communications Officer Park Min-ho was busier than ever. His station was receiving dozens of distress signals from across the galaxy. Other peaceful species under threat who had heard about the human intervention at Aquanis. Word was spreading that the Deathworlders would come to the aid of those who could not defend themselves. "We're getting requests for help from 17 different star systems," Min-ho reported to Admiral Dong-wook. "Some of them are being attacked by pirates, others by conquest fleets. They all want human protection. It was both an honor and a burden. Humanity had become the galaxy's immune system against aggression, but they could not be everywhere at once." Dong-wook found himself making impossible decisions about which species to save and which to leave to their fate. The solution came from an unexpected alliance. Other species that had been inspired by human actions began offering their own assistance. The Zenthari provided their advanced sensor networks to detect threats. The Mollusk Commonwealth contributed their defensive shields. The Avian Republic offered their fast courier ships to carry messages between star systems. Slowly, a new kind of galactic organization began to form. It was not a government or an empire, but a mutual defense network centered on the principle that strength should protect weakness. Humans provided the military force, but other species contributed what they could to support the effort. Lieutenant Choi So-young found herself at the center of this new alliance, translating between dozens of different species as they worked out the details of cooperation. It was exhausting work, but also deeply satisfying. She was helping to build something that had never existed before, a civilization based on protection rather than conquest. The transformation was not limited to military affairs. Human medical technology, crude but effective, was being shared. With species who had never encountered regenerative medicine, human engineering techniques, developed for survival on a hostile world, were being used to build better habitats for peaceful aliens. In return, humanity was learning from the species they protected. Kalari biotechnology showed humans new ways to grow living structures. Zenthari mathematics revealed more efficient methods of faster-than-light travel. The Mollusk Commonwealth's philosophy of patient cooperation helped human diplomats negotiate better treaties. 3 months after the Battle of Aquinas, Admiral Dong-wook received a message that changed everything. It came from the Vraxi hegemony itself. Not a threat or a demand for revenge, but a request for a meeting. The destruction of their fleet at Aquinas had sent shockwaves through their empire, and they wanted to negotiate. The meeting took place in neutral space, aboard a station, provided by the Galactic Mediation Council. The Vraxi delegation was led by High Commander Vorthak, a veteran warrior who had built his reputation by conquering peaceful worlds. He came expecting to face barbarians who fought without honor or restraint. Instead, he found humans who spoke quietly but carried weapons that could destroy planets. Admiral Dong-wook sat across from Vorthak at the negotiation table, flanked by representatives from every species that the Vraxi had ever threatened or conquered. "Your empire ends here," Dong-wook said simply. "You will release all slaves and prisoners. You will pay reparations to the species you have harmed. You will cease all aggressive expansion. If you refuse, we will hunt down every Vraxi ship in the galaxy until your entire civilization is extinct." Vorthak stared at the human admiral for a long moment. He had come prepared to negotiate from a position of strength, but the destruction of the Aquinas fleet had changed the balance of power in the galaxy.